Last night's Jimmy Kimmel Live turned explosive when Elon Musk clashed with the host in a brutal showdown. Kimmel's relentless jabs at Musk's ventures sparked a fiery exchange, ending with Musk storming off the set. The internet is buzzing with shock. The studio lights glared down on the Jimmy Kimmel Live set, the audience buzzing with anticipation as Jimmy Kimmel leaned back in his chair, a sly grin spreading across his face. Across from him sat Elon Musk, the billionaire innovator, his posture stiff, eyes narrowing as the crowd's applause faded. The energy in the room was electric, but there was an undercurrent of tension that even the casual viewer could sense. Kimmel, known for his sharp wit and occasional ruthlessness, had a glint in his eye that suggested he was ready to push boundaries. Musk, no stranger to public scrutiny, seemed prepared for a verbal sparring match, but nothing could have prepared him for the onslaught that was about to unfold. Kimmel kicked off the segment with his usual charm, tossing out light-hearted jabs about Musk's eclectic public persona. The audience laughed as he poked fun at Musk's cryptic social media posts, calling them a code even NASA couldn't crack. Musk forced a chuckle, his jaw tightening slightly, but he played along, tossing back a quip about Kimmel's late-night schedule being as erratic as a SpaceX launch. The crowd roared, and for a moment it seemed like the interview might stay in the realm of playful banter. But Kimmel had other plans. He leaned forward, his tone shifting from jovial to pointed, and the atmosphere in the studio shifted with it. "You know, Elon, I gotta hand it to you," Kimmel began, his voice dripping with mock admiration. "You've got a lot of big ideas. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, the Boring Company. I mean, you're like a kid with $1 billion Lego set, just building whatever pops into your head." The audience laughed, but there was a nervous edge to it. Musk's smile faltered, his fingers tapping restlessly on the armrest. Kimmel didn't let up. "But let's talk about some of those projects, shall we? Like the Hyperloop. You promised us we'd be zipping through tubes at 700 miles an hour by now. Where's my tube, Elon? I'm still stuck in LA traffic." The jab landed hard, and the audience's laughter grew louder, feeding Kimmel's momentum. Musk shifted in his seat, his expression darkening. He opened his mouth to respond, but Kimmel was already rolling. "And then there's Neuralink. You're gonna put chips in our brains? What, so we can all think like you? No offense, but I'm not sure I want my head wired to the guy who thought a $60,000 pickup truck with bulletproof windows was a good idea." The crowd erupted, and Kimmel paused for effect, letting the laughter wash over the set. He was in his element, each word a carefully aimed dart, and Musk was squarely in his crosshairs. Musk's face was a storm cloud now, his eyes locked on Kimmel, with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "You done?" he asked, his voice low, but sharp, cutting through the audience's noise. Kimmel raised an eyebrow, unfazed. "Not quite," he shot back. "Let's talk Tesla. Those stock prices have been on a wild ride, haven't they? One day you're the king of Wall Street, the next you're tweeting memes while investors panic. You ever think about, I don't know, focusing on the cars instead of playing internet troll?" The audience gasped, the boldness of the attack sinking in. Tesla's stock had indeed taken a hit recently, and Kimmel's words were like salt in a fresh wound. Musk's hands clenched into fists, his knuckles whitening. "You want to talk about focus?" he said, his voice rising. "How about you focus on telling jokes that land instead of punching up at people actually trying to change the world?" The crowd oohed, the tension spiking as the two men stared each other down. Kimmel's grin widened, but there was a hardness in his eyes now. He wasn't backing down, and Musk was clearly struggling to keep his composure. The segment was spiraling, and the producers in the control room exchanged nervous glances. This wasn't the light-hearted celebrity interview they'd planned. Kimmel leaned closer, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper. "Change the world? Elon, your Cybertruck's windows shattered on live TV. Maybe start with changing the glass." The audience roared, but Musk's face was a mask of barely contained fury. The line had been crossed, and the night was about to take a darker turn. The Jimmy Kimmel live set crackled with raw tension, the air thick with the weight of unspoken challenges. In the control room, producers hovered over their monitors, their headsets buzzing with urgent whispers. This wasn't the scripted banter they'd rehearsed. It was a verbal cage match, and neither Jimmy Kimmel nor Elon Musk was backing down. Kimmel's last jab about the Cybertruck's shattered windows still hung in the air, the audience's laughter fading into an uneasy hum as they sensed the shift. Musk's eyes burned with a fury that seemed to radiate from his core, his silence more menacing than any retort. Kimmel, undeterred, sat back with a smug tilt of his head, daring Musk to respond. Musk's voice, when it came, was a low growl, each word deliberate. "You think you're clever, Jimmy? Throwing cheap shots while hiding behind your desk?" The audience hushed, the sudden edge in his tone slicing through the room. "I build things. Real things. Rockets that land themselves, cars that drive themselves. What do you build? A career out of mocking people who actually take risks." The crowd erupted in a mix of cheers and gasps, some rooting for Musk's defiance, others stunned by his audacity. Kimmel's grin flickered, but he recovered quickly, his eyes glinting with the thrill of the fight. "Risks?" Kimmel shot back, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Oh, you're taking risks, all right. Like betting billions on a tunnel-digging company that's basically a glorified molehill. The Boring Company? More like the boring failure. How's that Vegas loop working out, Elon? I hear it's just a Tesla taxi stuck in a sewer." The audience roared, the mockery landing like a punch. Kimmel was relentless, his words fueled by the crowd's energy, each laugh pushing him to dig deeper. Musk's face twitched, a vein pulsing at his temple, but Kimmel didn't give him a chance to interrupt. "And let's not forget X," Kimmel continued, leaning forward, his tone dripping with disdain. "You bought a social media platform and turned it into your personal soapbox. Half the users are bots. The other half are arguing about crypto scams. Real visionary stuff, Elon. I bet you're proud." The crowd's laughter was deafening now, feeding Kimmel's fire. He was in complete control, or so he thought. Musk's hands gripped the armrests of his chair, his knuckles white, his breathing shallow. The billionaire was a coiled spring, and Kimmel was tugging at the last threads of his restraint. "You want to talk vision?" Musk snapped, his voice rising, cutting through the noise. "I'm trying to get humanity to Mars while you're sitting here making fart jokes for ratings. You don't get to lecture me about failure when your biggest risk is a bad monologue." The audience gasped, then cheered, the room splitting between those who admired Musk's boldness and those who craved more of Kimmel's venom. The host's eyes narrowed, his smile tightening into something predatory. He wasn't just playing to the crowd now. This was personal. Kimmel leaned in, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "Mars? Elon, you can't even keep your factories open without a Twitter tantrum. And speaking of Twitter, let's talk about those Tesla stocks. They're tanking faster than your reputation. Investors are jumping ship, and you're out here pretending you're Tony Stark. Newsflash. You're not a superhero, you're a stock market punchline." The audience exploded, the insult so raw it felt like a physical blow. Musk's face went pale, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and rage. Tesla's recent stock dip was public knowledge, but Kimmel's brutal framing made it sound like Musk's personal apocalypse. The control room was chaos now, producers shouting into their headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or let the carnage play out. Musk's voice trembled with fury as he leaned forward, pointing a finger at Kimmel. "You think you can tear me down with your little jokes? I've faced worse than you, Jimmy. You're nothing but a loudmouth with a laugh track." The crowd was on its feet, the energy in the room electric and unstable. Kimmel's lips curled into a dangerous smile, his next words poised to ignite the final spark. The Jimmy Kimmel Live stage was a battlefield. The air charged with hostility as the audience hung on every word. In the control room, producers were frozen, their hands hovering over the switch to cut the feed. But the spectacle was too raw, too magnetic to stop. Elon Musk's finger jabbed toward Jimmy Kimmel, his accusation, "You're nothing but a loudmouth with a laugh track," still echoing. The crowd was a roaring sea, some cheering Musk's defiance, others egging Kimmel on. Kimmel's dangerous smile widened, his eyes locked on Musk like a predator sizing up its prey. He wasn't just hosting a show anymore, he was waging war. Kimmel leaned back, letting the tension simmer, then struck with surgical precision. "A loudmouth, huh? That's rich coming from the guy who can't stop tweeting his way into lawsuits. Tell me, Elon, how many lawyers does it take to clean up your ex-posts? Or do you just pay them in Tesla stock?" "Oh wait, that's worthless now." The audience erupted, the jab slicing deep into Musk's pride. Tesla's plummeting stock was a sore spot, and Kimmel knew it. He was twisting the knife, each word designed to provoke. Musk's face flushed red, his chest heaving as he struggled to maintain control. "You want to talk worthless?" Musk shot back, his voice cracking with rage. "Your show's been recycling the same tired jokes for years. You're not breaking ground, Jimmy. You're just a vulture picking at people who actually matter." The crowd gasped, then cheered, the room splitting further into factions. Musk's words were a desperate counterpunch, but they only fueled Kimmel's fire. The host leaned forward, his voice low and venomous, cutting through the noise like a blade. "Matter? Elon, the only thing you're breaking is your shareholders' bank accounts. Let's talk SpaceX. You're out there promising moon bases, but your rockets keep blowing up on the launch pad. What's the plan? Sell the scraps for a new Cybertruck?" The audience roared, the mockery relentless. Kimmel was in his element, his confidence unshakable, as he dismantled Musk's empire piece by piece. The billionaire's hands shook, his eyes darting to the crowd, searching for an ally in the sea of laughter. Musk's voice was a snarl now, barely controlled. "You think you're untouchable, don't you? Sitting there, mocking people who take real risks? I've put everything on the line. My money, my name, my future. What have you ever risked, Jimmy? A bad Yelp review?" The crowd oohed, the intensity spiking as Musk's words hit a nerve. Kimmel's smile faltered for a split second, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. The accusation stung, and the audience sensed it, their cheers growing louder, more chaotic. Kimmel recovered quickly, his tone icy. "Risk? You're not risking anything, Elon. You're playing with other people's money. Neuralink? Sounds like a sci-fi pipe dream, but all you've got is a monkey playing Pong with a chip in its head. Call me when it writes a symphony." The laughter was deafening, the crowd feeding off Kimmel's cruelty. Musk's jaw clenched, his eyes blazing with a fury that seemed to consume him. The mention of Neuralink, a project he'd poured his heart into, was a step too far. "You're pathetic," Musk spat, his voice trembling with emotion. "You sit here, tearing down what you can't understand, while I'm building the future. You're a coward, Jimmy. A coward with a microphone." The audience was on its feet, the room a powder keg ready to explode. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his fingers tapping the desk as he prepared his next salvo. The producers in the control room held their breath, knowing the confrontation was teetering on the edge of no return. Musk was unraveling, and Kimmel was ready to push him over the brink. The Jimmy Kimmel Live set was a cauldron of raw emotion, the audience's roars fueling the escalating war between Jimmy Kimmel and Elon Musk. Musk's words, "You're a coward with a microphone," hung heavy, a direct challenge that silenced the room for a fleeting moment. Kimmel's eyes glinted with a dangerous intensity, his fingers still tapping the desk, each movement deliberate, calculated. The producers, In the control room were paralyzed, their screens flashing with the unfiltered chaos unfolding live. This was no longer a talk show. It was a public execution, and Kimmel was sharpening his blade. Kimmel leaned forward, his voice a chilling mix of mockery and menace. "A coward, Elon? That's cute. You're the one dodging questions about your failing empire. Let's talk. About the boring company again. You sold us a future of underground cities, but all we got was a sweaty tunnel in Vegas that smells like broken dreams." The audience erupted, their laughter a tidal wave crashing over Musk. Kimmel's precision was surgical, each jab targeting Musk's most vulnerable spots. The billionaire's face was a mask of fury, his hands gripping the chair so tightly the wood creaked. Musk's voice was hoarse, shaking with barely contained rage. "You're obsessed with tearing me down, aren't you? I'm out there solving problems, traffic, space travel, human consciousness. You're just a parasite, feeding off other people's work for claps." The crowd gasped, then cheered. The room a chaotic split of loyalties. Musk's defiance was desperate but fierce, a man fighting to salvage his pride. Kimmel's smile twisted, his eyes narrowing as he sensed blood in the water. "Parasite? Oh, Elon, you're breaking my heart," Kimmel said, his tone dripping with false pity. "But let's talk about solving problems. Your Tesla factories are a mess. Workers quitting, production delays, and don't get me started on those recalls. You're not solving problems, you're creating them. And Wall Street? They're done with you. Your stock's in freefall, and you're out here pretending it's all part of the plan." The audience roared, the mention of Tesla's plummeting stock hitting like a gut punch. Musk's eyes widened, a flash of pain crossing his face before rage took over. "You don't know what you're talking about," Musk snarled, leaning forward, his voice raw. "I've built companies from nothing while you've been coasting on network cash. You think you can judge me? You've never had to fight for anything in your life." The crowd was electric, their cheers and boos blending into a wall of noise. Musk's words were a cry from the heart, but Kimmel was unmoved, his grin now a predator's bared teeth. "Fight?" Kimmel shot back, his voice rising to match the crowd's frenzy. "You're fighting to keep your ego afloat, Elon. Let's talk X again. You turned a platform into a circus, and now it's a ghost town. Advertisers are fleeing, users are bailing, and you're still posting memes like it's 2015. That's not fighting, that's flailing." The laughter was deafening, the audience feeding off Kimmel's relentless assault. Musk's breathing was ragged, his eyes darting as if searching for an escape from the verbal onslaught. "You're so small," Musk said, his voice low, trembling with emotion. "You think you're winning because they're laughing? They're laughing at you, too, Jimmy. You're just too blind to see it." The crowd hushed, the weight of Musk's words landing like a slap. Kimmel's jaw tightened, his fingers freezing mid-tap. For the first time, a crack appeared in his armor, but he quickly masked it with a laugh, leaning closer to Musk. "Blind? Nah, I see you clear as day, Elon. A guy who's all talk and no delivery. Your promises are as empty as your stock portfolio." The audience exploded, the insult so vicious it felt like the room itself shook. Musk's face was a storm of rage and humiliation, his hands shaking as he reached for his microphone, the breaking point within sight. The Jimmy Kimmel live stage was a pressure cooker, the audience's roars a deafening backdrop to the verbal slaughter unfolding. Jimmy Kimmel's latest barb, "Your promises are as empty as your stock portfolio," had struck Elon Musk like a sledgehammer, the words reverberating through the studio. Musk's hands trembled as they hovered over his microphone, his face a twisted mask of rage and humiliation. The crowd was a frenzied beast, feeding off the carnage, their cheers and gasps amplifying the chaos. In the control room, producers were in a panic, their voices overlapping in a desperate bid to regain control, but the scene was too explosive to stop. Kimmel sat back, his eyes gleaming with triumph, ready to deliver the next blow. You feeling okay, Elon? Kimmel taunted, his voice laced with mock concern. You look like you're about to short-circuit. Maybe Neuralink can fix that temper of yours, huh? Oh wait, it's still just a lab rat fantasy. The audience erupted, the laughter a tidally wave that crashed over Musk. Kimmel was relentless, his words carving into Musk's legacy with surgical cruelty. The billionaire's eyes burned with a fury that seemed to consume him, his chest heaving as he struggled to form a response. The mention of Neuralink, his most personal project, was a wound too deep to ignore. Musk's voice was a low, guttural snarl. You're a bully, Jimmy, hiding behind your jokes, thinking you're untouchable. I've faced real fights, governments, competitors, gravity itself. You're just a guy who's good at reading. Cue cards! The crowd gasped, then cheered, the room a chaotic swirl of allegiances. Musk's defiance was raw, a last stand against Kimmel's onslaught, but it only fueled the host's fire. Kimmel leaned forward, his smile a razor's edge, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. Bully? Nah, I'm just honest, Elon. You're selling dreams you can't deliver. Like the Tesla Roadster. Where is it? You promised it years ago, and we're still waiting. Or is it stuck in the same black hole as your Hyperloop? The audience roared, the mockery hitting like a physical blow. Musk's face paled, his hands clenching into fists. Tesla's delayed projects were a public sore spot, and Kimmel was pressing it with sadistic precision. The crowd's laughter was a chorus of daggers, each chuckle driving Musk closer to the edge. You don't get it, Musk spat, his voice cracking with emotion. I'm building a future you can't even imagine. SpaceX is landing rockets, Tesla's changing transportation, and you're here, mocking it like it's a game. You're irrelevant, Jimmy. A footnote. The crowd oohed, the intensity spiking as Musk's words cut deep. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, a flicker of anger breaking through his polished facade. The accusation of irrelevance stung, and the audience sensed it, their cheers growing wilder, more unhinged. Kimmel's laugh was cold, calculated. Irrelevant? Elon, your companies are bleeding cash, your stock's a punchline, and your big ideas are just headlines. You're not a visionary, you're a hype man who's out of tricks. The audience exploded. The insult so raw it felt like the air itself cracked. Musk's hands shook violently now, his eyes wild with a mix of rage and despair. He reached for his microphone again, his fingers brushing the clip as if testing its weight. The control room was a storm of shouts, producers begging for a way to defuse the situation, but there was no turning back. You're done, Musk said, his voice trembling but resolute. You think you can humiliate me and walk away? I've built more than you'll ever understand, and you're nothing without this stage. The crowd was on its feet, the room a powder keg of anticipation. Kimmel's grin widened, his fingers tapping the desk with deliberate menace. He leaned in, his next words poised to shatter what little remained of Musk's composure. The final spark, ready to ignite the inferno. The Jimmy Kimmel live studio was a furnace of raw emotion. The audience's roars a deafening crescendo as Jimmy Kimmel and Elon Musk faced off in their final cataclysmic clash. Musk's trembling declaration, "You're nothing without this stage," hung in the air like a gauntlet thrown down. The crowd was a sea of frenzied energy, their cheers and boos a chaotic symphony. Kimmel's grin was a predator's, his fingers tapping the desk with a rhythm that pulsed like a heartbeat. In the control room, producers were shouting over each other, their screens a blur of the unfolding disaster, but no one dared cut the feed. Kimmel leaned in, his eyes locked on Musk, his voice a venomous blade, ready to deliver the killing blow. Nothing. Without this stage? Kimmel said, his tone icy and deliberate. Elon, you're nothing without your hype. Your companies are crumbling, your stock's a joke, and your future is just a PowerPoint slide. You're not a genius, you're a failure who's run out of excuses. The audience erupted, the insult so vicious it seemed to shake the walls. Musk's face contorted, a storm of rage and humiliation, his hands gripping his microphone as if it were his last lifeline. Kimmel's words were a public crucifixion, stripping away Musk's carefully crafted image with brutal precision. Musk's voice was a raw, broken roar. "You're wrong! I've changed the world while you've been playing court jester. SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, they're real, and you'll never understand what it takes to build them." The crowd gasped, then cheered, some moved by Musk's desperate passion, others craving more of Kimmel's venom. But Kimmel was unrelenting, his laugh a cold, mocking echo that cut through the noise. "Changed the world? Elon, you've changed nothing but your net worth, and even that's tanking. Your Cybertruck's a meme, your tunnels are a bust, and your Mars dream is a fairy tale. Face it, you're a fraud." The audience's roar was deafening, the room a crucible of chaos. Musk's eyes were wild, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking as he clutched the microphone. "You're a small man, Jimmy," he spat, his voice cracking with emotion. "You tear down what you can't comprehend because it's easier than admitting you're irrelevant." The crowd oohed, the tension spiking to unbearable heights. Kimmel's eyes narrowed, his grin tightening into a snarl. The accusation of irrelevance was a dagger, and he was ready to twist it back. "Irrelevant?" Kimmel shot back, his voice rising to a triumphant crescendo. "I'm here every night, calling out guys like you who think they're gods. You're not untouchable, Elon. You're just a loudmouth with a checkbook. And tonight, the world sees you for what you are. A loser." The audience exploded, the insult a thunderclap that reverberated through the studio. Musk's face went pale, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and despair. The weight of Kimmel's words, amplified by the crowd's frenzy, was too much to bear. With a sudden, violent motion, Musk ripped the microphone from his jacket, the wire snapping free as he hurled it to the floor. "I'm done!" he shouted, his voice a raw scream that silenced the room. "I won't sit here and be your punching bag." The crowd gasped, then erupted, the shock of Musk's surrender electrifying the air. He stood, his chest heaving, and pointed a trembling finger at Kimmel. "You're not worth this." With that, he stormed off the set, his footsteps echoing as security scrambled to follow. The audience was on its feet, their cheers and boos a chaotic roar. Kimmel leaned back, his grin triumphant, his eyes gleaming with victory. "Well, folks," he said, his voice smooth and unshaken, "looks like Elon's headed back to Mars. Too bad his rocket's out of fuel." The crowd roared with laughter, the tension breaking in a wave of catharsis. The cameras panned to the empty spot where Musk had sat, the microphone lying discarded on the floor, a symbol of Kimmel's dominance. The show cut to a frenzy of applause, the confrontation etched into history as Kimmel held the stage, unchallenged, the king of his domain.